Hello, welcome to this presentation based on my book titled The Other Side of Safety, Moving from Results-Based to Behavior-Based Safety by me, Robert Palmer, PhD. This is part 2, Applying the Science of Behavior to Safety. In chapter 4, we will review what motivates behavior by examining the 4 types of motivation: extrinsic, identified, intrinsic, and introjected. We will also consider emotional intelligence. Psychology is the scientific study of behavior, cognition, and emotion. Behavioral science, which is based on psychology, looks at the subject of human actions and explores the cognitive process and behavioral interactions between people in their natural work environment. It involves systematic analysis, investigation of human behavior through naturalistic observation, and controlled scientific experimentation. It attempts to accomplish legitimate, objective conclusions through rigorous formulations and observations. You practice science or you practice being anecdotal. A majority of safety programs are based on an anecdotal premise. Being anecdotal is not scientifically true or reliable, but is based on personal accounts rather than facts or research. Business leaders and safety leaders love being anecdotal because it's all about them, their experience, know-how, insights, and favorite stories, and it helps feed their larger-than-life personalities. But it also makes the work environment less safe. The age-old question, why do people do what they do, is still worth asking and understanding, especially in safety. Understanding the why could save countless lives and protect people from injuries. Science is the tool that helps us understand what motivates people to do what they do and seeks to understand why. Motivation is a key aspect in the world of safety, and safety leaders must understand motivation and how to motivate their people to act safely. Motivation is the proclivity to initiate, continue, or terminate certain behaviors at a particular time, and is strongly influenced by organizational culture. Motivation is a state of being that is subjective to forces acting within and upon the person that creates a disposition to engage in goal-directed behavior. Safety leaders need to understand the role that the safety culture plays in influencing the motivation levels of their people and how individuals are motivated. Extrinsic motivation is defined as not being part of the essential nature of someone, coming or operating from outside. Extrinsic motivation, then, is focused on what is outside the person. Extrinsic motivation has 4 major components: power, popularity, pleasure, and perfection. Because extrinsic motivators are extrinsic, they are easily observable, and so are their defense mechanisms, which are used often for avoidance and protection of the major components such as repression, regression, denial, reaction, projection, rationalization, or displacement. Identified motivation refers to a form of motivation that occurs as understanding or feeling the need to perform or accomplish a task, but not yet acting on this need. This is a powerful form of motivation as it is intrinsic in nature to the person and prepares the person for acting when enough motivation builds to the threshold level and action occurs. Intrinsic means to belong naturally. It is essential to the nature or constitution of a person, and intrinsic motivation refers to a natural internal motivation, and more importantly, essential to the individual. This form of motivation is subjectively based on the individual and is believed to occur when behavior aligns with values and enjoyment is experienced when doing a task. Introjected means the unconscious adoption of ideas or attitudes of others. Introjected motivation is an internalized motivation like intrinsic motivation, but it is based on non-action. Introjected motivation is how we passively learn from others, their good or their bad habits. It transfers to use via observation, and we are motivated to change our behavior to model the behavior of others. Motivation plays a key role in the safety culture. It plays a key role in employee engagement, the individual, the team, and organizational performance. These forms of motivation provide insightful perspectives on how people function, but more importantly, they provide different ways to access the motivation of the self and others. Safety leaders should be well trained in the ability to motivate people properly for personal and organizational improvement. Extrinsic is defined as not being part of the essential nature of someone, coming or operating from outside. Extrinsic motivation then is focused on what is outside the person. Extrinsic motivation has four major components: power, popularity, pleasure, and perfection. Because extrinsic motivators are extrinsic, they are easily observable, and so are their defense mechanisms, which are used often for avoidance and protection of the other major components, such as repression, regression, denial, reaction, projection, rationalization, or displacement. External regulation is extrinsic and refers to motivation that is regulated by external influences via intimidation, penalty, punishment, compliance, or conformity. For example, an employee who practices a safe behavior exhibits external regulation because he or she is instructed to by their safety leader. Identified regulation involves awarding a conscious value to a behavior in such a way that the action is accepted when it is personally important. This means that the safety culture could be experienced in such a way that being told to act safely requires that a person accept that telling or command immediately and change their behavior to comply with the tell or command. External regulation could be the cause of fake safety because an employee only behaves safely when the leader is present and telling the employee what to do in the immediate moments makes them fake their compliance. This is a dangerous cultural element to many safety cultures, and it needs to be addressed. Identified motivation refers to a form of motivation that occurs as understanding or feeling the need to perform or accomplish a task, but not yet acting on this need. This is a powerful form of motivation as it is intrinsic to the person and prepares the person for acting when enough motivation builds to the threshold level and action occurs. Often, motivation is a building process where need and desire are actualized. For example, if an employee could identify the consequence of risky behavior, they could be motivated not to take that risk. The need and desire to choose to be safe often takes time to actualize depending on the context of the situation because of fight or flight syndrome. Fight is based on courage, response, while flight is based on fear, reaction. This form of motivation is powerful because when actualized, it potentially creates lasting accomplishment or performance enhancement. However, it is also a risky, delicate balance. The risk is courage versus fear. Do you want your people to react in fear, or do you want your people to respond in courage? That is confidence, awareness, being present, and actively thinking. This level of motivation is often impractical to leaders because they don't want to wait for this process to develop in individuals. A safety leader needs to understand that motivational development of their people. Motivation is not instantaneous every time as most people think. Intrinsic means to belong naturally. It refers to a natural internal motivation and, more importantly, essential to the individual. This form of motivation is subjectively based on the individual and is believed to occur when behavior aligns with values and enjoyment is experienced when doing a task. This form of motivation can be triggered in a variety of ways. One example would be providing reinforcement that reflects the value of the individual. The key to understanding this internalized motivation is to align a person's vision, values, beliefs, and desires with the individual's goals and to define the performance requirements. Hence, the individual knows the minimum of success. Introjected means the unconscious adoption of ideas or attitudes of others. Introjected motivation is an internalized motivation like intrinsic motivation, based on non-action. Introjected motivation is how you passively learn from others. You learn the good or the bad, and it's important to understand that the motivation transfers into action via observation. You are motivated to change your behavior to model the behavior of others. The stimulus for the person's motivation is internal rather than external and therefore not observable until after the fact. This form of motivation is more common than leaders believe. A leader models their behavior, and whether they believe it or not, it influences other leaders. For example, a leader consistently criticizes people using a sarcastic tone of voice. The leader points out the poor job someone performed, or the leader blames people or puts people down. Good leadership can be modeled as well. For example, a leader demonstrates calm, cool, and collected reflection before rushing to blame. Motivation plays a key role in safety culture, employee engagement, and individual team and organizational performance. These forms of motivation provide insightful perspectives on how people function, but more importantly, they provide different ways to access the motivation of the self and others. Safety leaders should be well trained to motivate people properly for personal and organizational improvement. Another aspect of motivation lacking in the safety industry is emotional intelligence, EI. The measure of one's EI is done by using an emotional quotient, EQ, assessment. Emotional intelligence is the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, to discriminate among them, and use this information to guide one's thinking and actions. That's according to Slovey and Mayer, 1990. One's EI is an excellent way to understand how an individual functions emotionally. A safety leader needs to learn an individual's strength areas and the reasons for performance gaps, and then identify areas for development. Understanding how someone experiences the work culture and how they operate when working with others. Safety leaders need to understand how emotional intelligence can be utilized as a condition that effectively shapes the safety culture. People must be emotionally motivated to perform at their best. It's one thing to understand one's emotions, but it's another thing to control them, and it's yet another thing to control them and deploy them effectively toward a goal, purpose, or a great vision. The practice of safety needs to include emotional intelligence and how the safety leader develops their leadership style, and that style conditions the safety culture in how communications, policy, procedures, and everyday practices of safety are conducted. Emotional intelligence is a competency of safety leadership. Emotional intelligence supports the capacity and capability of a safety leader's ability to expand their influence. One of the most significant applications of emotional intelligence is the understanding and effective application of empathy. Empathy is the ability to acknowledge the feelings and emotions of other people. Often, empathy is confused with apology. When hearing some bad news, people will state, "I'm sorry," for some reason. But that's not empathy, that's an apology. Empathy is a link between us and others and is a significant factor of influence to the safety leader. because it is how an individual leader can understand what others are experiencing, as if we were feeling it ourselves. Proper empathy is the ability to acknowledge the feelings of another. Empathy is when you acknowledge what you see in someone's face or when you acknowledge what you hear in someone's voice. For example, when someone looks stressed, you can express empathy by stating, "Your eyes look focused and you look stressed. Do you want to talk about it? You look overwhelmed. How can I help you?" Or it could be something you hear in someone's voice. For example, "You sound frustrated. I'm willing to listen if you think it will help." "Hey, you sound upset. Talk to me." Empathy leads to practical action, and therefore an exercise in intelligence. Empathy is not just an expression, but a form of communication that observes and recognizes an emotion and expresses care regarding that emotion that seeks to help by being ready to change from a negative emotion to a positive emotion via a potential solution. This is what drives a bond between people. This is the serious work of leadership, keeping people focused on the positive. Leadership seeks to influence people to focus on the positive, strive for the goal by honoring the values, and complete the vision. Authoritative leadership is ignorant of empathy because the focus is on results. Authoritative leadership is ignorant of emotional intelligence because it lacks intelligence. However, the use of empathy opens the door to understanding regarding the use of consequences. Consequences should be used in the context of empathy. In the next slide, we will continue part 2, applying the science of behavior to safety. Chapter 5 will focus on consequences, how to maximize the impact of positive reinforcement, how to minimize the impact of negative reinforcement, 4 rules for feedback, and the 5 steps for performance feedback. Robert Palmer has a PhD in industrial organizational psychology and 18 years of industry experience, expert in developing the leadership of leaders to influence performance utilizing the science of behavior. Robert's focus is the management of leader, employee, and organizational performance. Robert developed the strength on strength method, which aligns personality, character, and case strengths with competencies and emotional intelligence, resulting in people's full functioning performance. Robert teaches you how to create cultural conditions that shape behaviors for people to perform at their best, linking performance initiatives to business strategies and outcomes. Dr. Palmer's experience and research reinforce leaders to practice influence rather than authority. Global project management experience gained from international business projects in India, Israel, and Europe. Dr. Palmer is the author of the Palmer Performance Planner, Reflect, Focus, Deliver, and The Other Side of Safety, Moving from Results-Based to Behavior-Based Safety. CRC Press, Taylor and Francis Group.